better roll them dice. You never know if it could change your life. Take a chance, you need the wrong or right.
Good afternoon, Matt.
Good afternoon, Rob, and welcome to...
Sorry, I thought you were going to do a bit. Welcome to Dungeon Master of None, the high-energy, peppy morning show where your two hosts always know what they're talking about, have definitely recently had coffee, and are alert and focused and prepared every time. I'm your pet master, Rob.
Yes, he's the dungeon master who lifts, but he doesn't need lifts. We stand a short king. Welcome, Dungeon Master Rob.
It's true. All these things are true. Yeah,
and I'm Matt.
And this is Matt.
Here.
I didn't prepare
also here
a thing for Matt.
Well, today we're talking about the Darkest Sun, the world of Athas.
Yes, that's right. If you listen to our previous episodes, which most of you have, you'll know that we have brought this up a number of times. We are fans of the setting, and with the imminent release of Matt Mercer's campaign guide to Wildmount, it seems that if we are getting Dark Sun, it is in the distant future, and it also seems like we're probably not getting Dark Sun. So rather than continue to vaguely allude to the Dark Sun campaign setting, Matt and I thought we would actually talk about it. So we're going to actually talk about it.
And Rob's going to start us off because he's a little bit of an expert on Dark Sun. Rob, tell us about your time at Burning Man.
Matt has owned me. I have indeed been to Burning Man, a weird festival in the desert where there is... Well,
it's basically one Dark Sun lark.
There is too much sun, however, there's very little clothing. Everybody is dirty.
Okay,
and,
check. Water is water scarce?
Water is scarce. Their minds are expanded in much the same way that...
There's a lot of psionics.
A lot of people claiming psionic abilities at Burning Man. Magic is not outlawed, unfortunately.
Is there a...
I would have preferred if there were less magic when I was there.
It is organized into a single city-state, am I correct?
Temporary nomadic city-state. Yeah, the parallels, they're really coming hard and fast.
Full of elves who will steal your stuff,
that's
probably.
100% correct. Wayfish elves, who will eat all your food and drink your booze and vanish into the night.
Is it ruled by a sorcerer king?
It's not. They're actually, I wish I could point to a demigod-like figure, but the founders are invisible, and it is vaguely communal and democratic. So in that sense, it is not. Though, I strongly believe that as it becomes increasingly expensive and inaccessible to anybody who's not from the Silicon Valley sect, that a king will emerge, probably... a Zuckerberg type, probably not Zuckerberg himself, probably somebody with some actual, charisma.
More time on their hands, probably.
I'm thinking Alexis Ohanian. I can see him becoming, benevolent god king of Burning Man.
I'm glad I don't know who that is.
Married to Serena Williams. He's one of the founders of Reddit.
Oh, the Reddit guy. Yeah.
He's okay. He's one of my I don't know. Tech dude I hate the least, probably, I would say.
Well, did you have any magical experiences at Burning Man that will give us some insight into Dark Sun?
That's a conversation for a different podcast. But Matt, this is a family podcast.
Family show? Okay.
It's not a family podcast.
Did you burn anyone alive in a wicker man?
So I was not at... Nobody died at the Burning Man I was at. We did just burn a regular man, though a few years ago somebody ran into the temple as they were burning it, which is pretty messed up and intense.
Did they die?
They did die. Yes, they burned alive inside the temple.
Okay. God damn.
Anyway.
Well, it's as brutal as Athas.
Allow me to take another tack because, as we've alluded to, Dark Sun is a desert world, a grim world of low magic and brutality, a dying world, a dying earth, perhaps, which...
there could be a whole genre there.
Yeah, as if there were a genre of based off of a series of short stories and novels based on the same idea, the Dying Earth series by none other than Jack Vance, for whom we have to thank
for many things, and for our spellcasting
but especially
system.
the spellcasting system that dominates Dungeons and Dragons and everything that is sort of in its shadow, which is the idea.
We love getting domed by Jack Vance.
The idea that a magician or a wizard can only cast spells that they have memorized, and the syllables or words thereof then vanish from their minds once they have cast the spell. So this is why you have a certain number of spells per day in Dungeons and Dragons, and that is the origin of it. But do we want to talk about the Dying Earth books at all?
Yeah, sure. I think that's a good place to start. So there is this genre of Dying Earth books, is sort of ideas that the entire campaign setting is filled with this ennui, sense of loss that civilization is approaching its end, and there's really nothing anyone can do about it.
Yeah, and the Dying Earth books, it is Earth, right? It's actually Earth, not
it's Earth in the far future.
Humans have destroyed it, and it's a grim, dark. The sun is dying, everything sucks. And there are several series in this tradition. I'm currently reading the Book of the New Sun by Gene Wolfe, which is a really, really good, very weird science fiction series of novels. But the general idea is an aesthetic one, right? It's the idea that the world is dying, and that possibly magic or technology is responsible for that, and everybody's just trying to... It's post-apocalyptic, but more so.
Athas, the world, as the world of Dark Sun is known, is not Earth in the far future, but it is a campaign setting in a sort of the far future of its world, in that it is beyond the golden age of civilizations, and the world is definitely, there's really not a lot, it seems, anyone can do to bring the world back from its ecological and magical desolation.
So what's cool about these books and about Dark Sun is that it comes from like a radically different sci-fi and fantasy tradition, right?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, the roots are like sort of in stuff.
There's no Tolkien here.
No Tolkien here. So there's stuff like, the roots are in things like Edgar Rice Burroughs' John Carter of Mars.
Right, the Barsoom Saga.
The Barsoom Saga.
Yeah.
Also the single biggest monetary flop in Disney history. Not that bad of a movie. It's fine. It definitely didn't deserve to sink as bad as it did. But $300 million flushed down the drain to try to make the kid from Friday Night Lights into an action star. Just didn't...
Hey, they didn't waste any of that on the rights to the source material, because it's in the public domain.
Public domain, baby.
So I'm, they did okay.
Clear eyes, full hearts, can lose a lot of money on John Carter of Mars. Yeah.
It was a great movie. Yeah. I really liked it.
I did enjoy it too.
Dotar Sojak. The other influence is, I think, obviously things like the Mad Max movies. This came out in the late 80s, early 90s. And of course, the Dune novels,
the Dune novels.
Right?
So when you're playing in Dark Sun, or when you're in the Dying Earth subgenre, a cool thing is that it's still recognizably fantasy. There's still magic and swords and all this stuff, but it's not Tolkien fantasy. Much like when you're doing something inspired by Conan, it's fantasy, but you don't have the same things going on. And I was reading through the book, and it was talking about how the designers were worried that Dragonlance had run its course and wanted to create something new. And so they were like, well, let's just do something wildly different. No dwarves, no elves, something else. And then they were like, well, hold on. That's a bit much. We can't...
Wait, we gotta have
dwarves and elves. Yeah. That's going to be a bit much. We're going to lose our core audience, which they're probably right about. But they were like, well, how can we start from a different, starting point? So it's like...
Well,
yeah.
I like this because I think Athas, Dark Sun, is the first campaign setting for Dungeons & Dragons that did try to do something radically different while keeping enough of the elements that keeps the familiar trappings of D&D enough in your mind that you can be like, this is still a Dungeons & Dragons game.
Yeah, it's bold. I think it's definitely actually probably more ambitious than Eberron for sure. I love Eberron.
Yeah, Eberron scaled this way back.
Eberron is weird and different, and I love it. But Dark Sun is definitely, it's a whole new thing. I guess Spelljammer's also pretty weird, but both Spelljammer and Dark Sun definitely are more ambitious and innovative in what they're trying to do. So if you're really weary of the same... Oh, my cat's vomiting. Just waiting for him to be done.
I could barely hear the cat.
I know.
vomit.
I'm just like worried that it's going to be
lovely.
like in the background when I'm talking.
No cats in Dark Sun. Everyone has pet lizards.
That's right. Yeah, I think he's done. It's radically different, and it's, you know, everything from the currency to the weapons that people use to the animals that are
art.
Yeah, are just, it's a whole new thing. So if you have gotten tired of the same old, even Forgotten Realms, Eberron, Mythos, Greyhawk, you want something wild and different, Dark Sun is available to you. Though we'll talk a bit about the rules challenge of Dark Sun maybe at the end, but it's still definitely
right. Especially for 5e.
Especially for 5e, but it's still something you can play in for sure.
I'm thankful for Dark Sun in that I think if we didn't have it, it sort of pushed the boundaries of what D&D can be. Mm-hmm. And I can imagine there would be a lot less fun homebrew campaigns where people said, well, we're going to do something really crazy. And, you know, all the elves are going to be nomadic thieves and the halflings are going to be cannibals and everything's going to be awful or different in some way, right? We didn't have Dark Sun sort of saying, oh, yeah, here, look, we sort of successfully did this.
It's also high weird, right? It comes in the sort of mid-century sci-fi fantasy tradition of just getting weird with it. The same thing that produced Journey to the Barrier Peaks in D&D terms. Just weirdness. Not just in terms of the actual setting, but in terms of themes and ideas and playstyle. You can still have fun and heroic epic stories, but it's gonna make more sense for it to be strange and odd adventures of survival against weird foes.
Right.
And
you're more likely to die against a psionic plant than you are defending a village from a horde of marauding orcs.
Yeah, you're gonna die miserably and possibly embarrassingly to some strange circumstance. You will not be nobly defending the ramparts against a marauding horde of orcs. There aren't even orcs. There are no orcs.
Right. They've all been genocided away. Also, if you're defending anyone's ramparts, you're probably working for the bad guys.
Nope. There's basically no civilization except for bad dudes. All the cities are run by the baddest dudes, dragon kings. So these are the hallmarks of Dying Earth, right? Post-apocalyptic, grim, weird,
right?
Shades of gray, and
we've thrown it all in with a bunch of desert stuff.
Yeah,
right?
Very, very desert themed.
And so it's grim dark, but there's no 30 Years Warhammer grim darkness. It's a very different flavor of grimdark, one that I like much better.
It's also often like low technology to the point of using like clubs and bone weapons because, you know, all the
metal is scarce. Yeah. A metal sword is more valuable than 1,000 slaves.
So that's the Dying Earth general subgenre. What's specific about where does Dark Sun specifically take it?
Well, I think it takes it in a drawing from a couple of fantasy, sci-fi, and historical traditions. There's sort of a feeling of early, like, Sumerian war among city-states, where the kings are also god priests, kind of. And they all seem like they suck. There's a lot of slavery. Irrigation is important. So it basically always makes me think of Sumer.
Well, right, and it's this world where we have returned to city-states, but it makes sense because not only are they ruled by god kings, but the god kings are actual god kings. They are epic-level wizards with psionic powers who have transformed themselves into dragons and are dragon kings and are essentially demigod-like entities to whom there are even, you know, clerics and other, you know, divine casters that draw upon them for power.
The dreaded Templars.
The Templar.
Yeah. And then, yeah, I mean, I think the sort of Mad Max vibe was very much in the minds of the designers. Though I think I've read in several places that they basically took one guy's art, Brahm, or whatever that guy is called, who likes to draw a lot of people in deserts wearing bikinis
lot of leather
and
harnesses and belts and buckles.
Yes.
If you
bone spears.
if you're into soft, BDSM attire, this is your book. Pick up the OG Dark Sun books for sure.
I think they just had this person draw them some art, and they're like, all right, this is cool. We'll build a world around that. So along with the Mad Max kind of fight over resources and survival, there's a lot of you need to get a caravan from one place to another without losing all your precious water or guzzling. Then that's Dark Sun.
If you're a fan of Fallout, this is going to be probably the types of stories and the types of play are going to be a little bit familiar to you. It's very much the same type of thing.
The one thing that's missing is, there's a lot of, you can discover ancient magical artifacts or psionic artifacts, but there's not like you in a ancient vault that's actually a radiation shelter, pick up an AK-47 or
right. There's no ancient technology.
Radio.
Everything has always been terrible, or less terrible, but that you can find some mystical artifacts and cool weapons, but really it's just slightly better variations on what you've already got. There's not a ton of loot of any sort to retrieve.
The first thing I met was a fly with a buzz and the sky with no clouds. The heat was hot and the ground was dry, but the air was full of sound. I've been through the desert on a horse with no name. It felt good to be out of the rain. In the desert, you can't remember your name because there ain't no one.
All right, so I think we've talked enough about Dark Sun's inspirations. Do you want to talk about sort of all the things that make it different and interesting? I think these are useful things that can... I think one thing Dark Sun does really well is it very clearly defines what is important for its campaign setting.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It's so radically different that its characteristics very much set it apart.
Well, let's start with first principles then, Matt. Let's start with magic and its presence in the world of Athas. Athos?
And Athas?
Athas? We'll call it Athas from here on.
Athas. Ooh, I don't know. Magic's bad, Rob.
Magic
we don't
is
like it.
bad. Why is magic bad, Matt?
Well, the two things that are, I think, pretty majorly different from a regular D&D world is that arcane magic has a price. It drains the life from the world unless you're a special nice wizard that tries not to do that. So one of the reasons why the world is a desert and really shitty now is because of arcane magic. Divine magic is also different. There are no gods. The gods are dead and gone, and they don't listen to us. There's only the sorcerer kings. So clerics worship the elements themselves and are very rare.
This is a pretty ambitious thing for them to have done, but if you are a wizard in the world of Athas, you are illegal. You are bad. You're potentially a good revolutionary, but you are opposed to all forces of order, and you wield the very power that desolated the earth. You are inherently dangerous, and I don't remember, I didn't look through the 4th edition book, but in the 2nd edition book, and in the early editions, there were some pretty robust rules for being a bad wizard. It's called a defiler. And
good wizards are preservers.
A defiler, there are a lot of defiler rules where you can basically just drain the earth to get free meta magic or cast spells without using up a spell slot or all sorts of things, which is incredibly tempting, but you gain defilement points and risk turning into hideous magic zombie or obviously just destroying the world. And people
it's
don't
an
like
unquestionably evil act, recognized as evil by even the baddest people in the world.
Even the God Kings don't want arcane magic running around, not just because they might be opposed by arcane spellcasters, but also because the world's destroyed enough. Please stop using arcane magic. As an alternative,
Rob, this smacks of politics to me.
The whole
Get your
thing
politics
smacks
out
of
of my
politics. I overturned
fantasy
the
campaign.
D&D table.
I'm sensing a metaphor here to certain uses of certain fuels made of fossils.
Indeed. Listen, back in the 50s and 60s, Matt, we didn't. Subtext is for cowards, Matt. We just said what we meant.
Yes.
So, as an alternative, psionics are incredibly common in Athas and in the world of Dark Sun. You can expect...
Yes, your cat, which is a lizard, is probably psionic.
Yeah, most races have like some sort of psionic ability inherent to them. If you're any sort of skilled craftsman or warrior, you probably have some sort of psionics, that you're using. There are psionic healers, and everywhere you might expect there to be magic in like a high magic world, there's psionics in the world of Dark Sun.
Yeah, and it's sort of, I think, assumed that every player character would have at least a minor psionic power.
Right. So all of the same classes are there. You can still be a sorcerer, you can still be a wizard, but you're probably more likely to be a scion or a psychic warrior or a soul knife, or, there's a lot more psionic classes than there are. Wizards are extremely rare. Psionic warriors are not incredibly common. There's a lot more like big concepts. So this makes me think of Matt made a good point about how the world building is reflected in the mechanics and sort of the function of the game. In that if you're a fighter or any sort of like martial class, you are probably shaped by the gladiatorial pits, because people love their gladiator games in the world of Dark Sun. And so if you're a fighter, you're either one of the God King's soldiers gone rogue, or you're at best a mercenary, but you probably spent some time doing fighting in the gladiatorial pits, which means, you've been facing psychic warriors or monks or whatever, and everybody's traditions sort of come out of that sort of fighting style. Which brings me to, I was just thinking about, let's talk about the races of Dark Sun. This is another place where they have done some big time changes.
Right. And this is, I think, where we got, three new races, one of which I have a particular fondness for, right? So there are some new races in addition to big twists on the old races. There are 3 Kreen, bug hunter psionic people, half giants and half human dwarves, which are called moles, who are basically bred to be slaves or gladiators. But there's big changes to the regular races, right? Dwarves are often laborers and slaves. Elves are sneaky nomads who steal your stuff. Halflings are barbarians who are the original cannibals, but the original inhabitants of the world, which is, I think, a pretty big twist. Yeah. And humans are very common, and a lot of the other monstrous races, goblins, orcs, kobolds, have basically been genocided away, that if you read the lore, were once killed off by the people who are now the sorcerer kings.
There's also, did you mention half giants, Matt? The half giants
are half giants, right?
Particularly interesting one. But
right, another psionic race.
So the Thrykeen are very cool. The moles are a very interesting. Are the Aarakocra native to Dark Sun? They were in the book, the second edition book. I don't remember.
I thought they were in some other book first, but they're definitely a part of the setting.
The Thrykeen are super cool.
They have a lot of cool races in Dark Sun, and I'm sad that moles or mules and Thrykeen have never really made the jump to Forgotten Realms or other settings, which is sad, because I think they're fun ideas.
Cynically suggest why, there's a reason why the cool and or sexy races keep being prominently featured in newer editions of Dungeons and Dragons, and we lose the cool weird ones like Thrykeen, for example. I'm just, I'm just.
You're blaming tieflings?
I'm blaming tieflings. Yes, the problem is tieflings, I guess is what I'm saying. It is all to blame. It's all tieflings are all to blame. Anyway.
Well, I think one of the interesting things that is forefronted in Athas is not only is your the regular races are here and many of them have interesting twists, but very important is sort of what your position in the world is. Are you a slave?
Right.
Are you a free person? Are you living in the outskirt villages of a city-state, or are you a barbarian of the wastes?
Yeah, there's very much
part of the noble families.
Very much a caste system, and you are encouraged to think about your position within it. So let's talk about. This brings me to thinking about. Let's talk about the Dragon Kings. I think this is a particularly interesting part of the world. So.
Right, so we've got seven city-states
yeah.
and 7 dragon kings and queens.
And some of them, each of them has sort of their own style and ethos and aesthetics, but they're all evil. They're all real bad dudes and dudettes who are responsible for the destruction of the earth and the genocide of all sorts of things. I mean, that's it for civilization. Wait, there is one free city, right? Or something like that?
Well, so there's a little bit, and this is one of the sad things about the world of Dark Sun, is that in the 90s, TSR sort of took a weird turn into putting maybe a little more emphasis on novels and stuff.
Yeah.
And they released a series of novels set in Dark Sun that basically advanced a meta plot that leads to a revolution that overthrows one of the Sorcerer Kings, which the player characters can only, in a series of published adventures, can sort of be hangers-on to, which sucks, right?
Oh, that's right. Yeah. So
and
go ahead.
One of the nice things that 4th did, because they released a revised version of the campaign setting that sort of takes place after these events, which isn't as cool, because basically the cool heroic thing of overthrowing a Dragon King, which some of your players are probably going to want to do, has already been done. So don't do that.
Yeah.
Just go back to the original sort of setup.
So the
of
book
the campaign.
that I have takes place after that. It talks about the overthrow of one of the kings, but then
Calic of Tyr.
But then all the kings are back. So that kind of did a pretty good job of talking about how, there was a chance for hope and then everybody got squished. But Matt is correct in that it probably is better to just skip that, so that the first time, if your players want to be the first ones to overthrow a Dragon King, they should be. They should not be.
This is, I think, another thing that Eberron learned from this campaign setting, right? Eberron has very clearly said that, we're never going to, advance the setting timeline or something like that. And they basically did let's advance the timeline in the worst way.
No, I don't need to get...
I don't want to read a series of tie-in novels to figure out what happens.
I do.
But anyway, 7 Sorcerer Kings.
Sorry, back to the...
Tyr, Balak, Draj, Golg, Nibene. Am I missing one? Ram,
that's right.
Urik.
So...
And the hidden city of Draxor, or Draxon, or something. Anyway, we can talk about that later.
So each of these Dragon Kings is
it's terrible in their own way.
Epic level wizard that, now rules over a city-state, and this is basically it for civilization, right? If you either live under the thumb of one of these, and they are, they have stats, right? But they are essentially unassailable, right? They are epic level dragons with epic level wizard abilities and psionics.
Yeah.
So you could theoretically challenge them, but it would be quite a feat to do so. And of course they, control massive armies and, infinite resources. And so when you're playing in Dark Sun, you're not going to be overthrowing really anybody, because they all serve a Dragon King. And, unless you're venturing in the wastes and I guess trying to kill a bandit lord or, a warlord or, some sort of barbarian out in the middle of nowhere, you're basically just trying to navigate this, miserable, horrifying world. And that's kind of cool. That, like, you're trying to survive under an oppressive regime. And I do think most players are probably going to eventually want to overthrow that regime, but you're talking about spending like most of your character's lifespan, both in terms of actual life and campaign time, just trying not to draw the attention of a Dragon King or any of his or her servants while just trying to get by.
And one of the fun things about this is, I think, is pretty explicitly stated in most of the source material book that everyone hates the Dragon Kings. No one really likes them, right? And it's not like they're tyrants that have fans. It's like, oh yeah, we know our ruler is evil, but like, what are you gonna do?
I mean, one of them has like,
which is great,
weekly cullings where they just murder a bunch of people as a display of force. One of them just keeps making zombies and makes all of the citizens live alongside zombies. Like, they're all just varying degrees of shitty. There is no good Dragon King. They are
right. They're just, and I'm impressed that they were able to come up with so many different flavors of shitty.
Yeah.
Right. Oh, this one's forest shitty. Oh, this one's shitty, but claims that she's the representative of a god.
Yeah.
This one's just straight up shitty.
Yeah. And this gives each city its own unique flavor and potentially a lot of different campaign hooks and ideas depending on where your players are from. Each city is going to have a different set of challenges and a different set of aesthetics, and it will be a wildly different campaign in terms of what you have to deal with if you want to do something in one of the only civilized places left in Athas.
Right. Being in Tyr versus Nibide versus Golg is very different in sort of the power structures your player characters might be asked to navigate or deal with. Anyway, the city-states and the Sorcerer Kings and their servants, the Templars, who are stated as sort of divine spellcasters who get their spells from the Sorcerer King. And I would love to play a player character who is actually a Templar gone rogue or about to go rogue or something like that. So many great opportunities for storytelling.
Yeah, there really are. The Templar are cool because the Dragon Kings are basically serve as a conduit to the elements, so they're not like checking up on everybody who's one of their clerics, but obviously if you're a Templar of one of the Dragon Kings and you go rogue, then that's kind of like a ticking clock. That's a risk. The longer you go, the more you're likely to draw the attention of someone, and that would be just such a great character idea.
Yeah. Oh man. The Moon Priests of Draj, also super cool. There's a lot of based on the way the names and of the cities and people. Again, ancient Sumer or perhaps central Mexico kind of. Mm-hmm. A lot of Zuggurats and pulling people's hearts out and
pyramids.
Throwing them down.
So let's talk a bit about we've mentioned it a bit, but like the flora and fauna of Dark Sun. So like one thing that's important to remember is that everything's not just like desert, because Matt, desert is full of life. No, not the Dark Sun Desert, though.
Okay, David Attenborough.
The Dark Sun Desert is not full of life. It is literally like a desolate wasteland, blasted,
full of death
by arcane magic. So, there's no cats. Is that right? There's no cats, no dogs, no fun, friendly mammals. That's canon.
Just
lizards.
There are no of the nice things.
Pterosaurs.
Giant insects that people herd like cattle. Big birds.
Yeah, birds and insects. And there's a lot of monsters were made specifically for this setting. And I want to make sure that I'm actually getting this correct. But the monster manual is just like full of like real good things to fight. I think Zorns and Zills. Are those from Dark Sun, or are those just, am I misremembering?
I don't think they're from Dark Sun.
Never mind. But lots of hideous bugs and
hideous bugs with psionic powers and lots of abilities to sort of grab you and pull you off into a sandstorm and
drag you into the sands and consume you. Good stuff like that. Like really, really. If you like, this is a great campaign for you're just trying to get a caravan from one place to another, and it's increasingly difficult to do so. This is a cool thing, actually, and normally I disagree with this strategy. I usually want more rather than less, but the authors of Dark Sun have specifically talked about how they wanted to sort of keep the focus on Athas, and so there are only a couple of other planes. There's basically the ethereal plane and a plane of shadow and the elemental planes, but outsiders live there. And so there's not, this infinite abyss or, the heavens. And if you want to, sure, you can travel to these planes, but it's not a nice place to be. And there are other planets.
The moons are described, though I don't know if we ever got a source book that actually takes us there. Yeah. One moon might actually have like lots of water, which seems nice and a interesting hook. Uh-huh. But even in the Spelljammer stuff, it talks about how like everyone really struggles to get into and out of Athas. Yeah. Right. No one wants to go there. There's some weird thing, cutting Athas off from the gods, and that's a perfectly great way to set up your campaign if you want to cut down on some of this plain stuff. Yeah.
It would be a great place for somebody to crash land in a Spelljammer campaign and get stuck and have to escape from Athas.
It would be very sad. Yes. But, great, lots of great monsters, horrors in the giant silt sea, silkworms, big chitinous bugs with a billion tongues that can grab you and pull you over to them.
And of course,
lots of stuff like that.
Lots of things with psionic abilities. Enemies.
Yes, almost every monster has, at least in the second edition rules, has a psionic ability or 7.
So I kind of want to take this moment to shift in the direction of, I guess we're going to call this rules and mechanics, because as I was going back through my second edition book, I was, which I have obviated the space in my brain where I kept second edition rules information, and I had kind of forgotten a lot of the stuff that once had ruled my life and dominated my nightmares. But there's a lot of the ways that the rules reflect the setting is very, very interesting. So we talked about defiler magic, and so there's these rules for accepting basically defilement points in order to do extra things, which very quickly becomes untenable, and of course is a unspeakably evil act that everybody will hate. But it's an interesting mechanic. And then of course the really big thing is that psionics are commonplace, and almost every character is going to have some. And we have not had psionics rules for a really long time, and still don't really have any that say what you will about the second edition and third edition psionics rules, they were functional. They were complicated, and I understand the reasons why they have not made a reappearance. I know that Wizards wants to keep 5th edition simple, but they worked. They were functional, and they are sort of like critical to the world of Dark Sun, right? Understanding or having psionics and having psionic rules that function correctly is kind of like critical to the setting.
I was thinking about this a lot. If you want to play this in 5th edition, right, as opposed to 2nd or 4th edition, where we have official things that'll support your campaign, there's basically 2 huge rule challenges you have to make beyond, your general reskinning monsters and stuff like that, which is 1, psionics rules for both characters who want to be pure psionic classes like a psychic warrior or a scion, but also just sort of the wild talent rules, so everyone could have a minor psionic power. And then 2, Dark Sun needs massive new equipment rules in that metal armor and arms are almost impossible to get. So how are you going to make rules for having obsidian or bone or leather, arms and armor, right? And how do you make those rules so they both, give you the right feel of the world, but, don't bog things down or make things unfun?
Yeah, 5th edition does have rules for materials, but they're not very relevant, and they don't include a lot of the things that are important to Dark Sun. And you can homebrew these, and there's conversions, but
right. Do you want to, for example, say, an inferior weapon, if you have a bone sword or an obsidian sword, it has a -1 to hit and damage? You could do that. Does that make the game more fun or less fun? I don't know. Should you just say obsidian or bone weapons are normal weapons and use the normal stats, and if you find a metal sword, then it has some sort of bonus?
I mean, you could treat metal weapons as just a +1 weapon, if you wanted to.
I know, but what accurately portrays the feel of the world where everything you have is shitty without ruining the balance of the game? It's a tough nut to crack.
Yeah, and 5th edition doesn't really encourage this type of... there's not good rules for this. So
if I had to take a stab on it, Rob, this is what I would do. I would not mess with to hit, because that's a big no-no.
I agree.
In 5th edition. I would probably take the tack of basically anything made out of bone or something like that has its damage dice reduced by 1, which is not a huge change. Anything made out of like obsidian or something like that, or crystal, has normal damage dice, but maybe has some sort of break vulnerability to being sundered or something like that. And then armor, I don't know what I would do, but I would probably just throw out all the high level armors and say, tough luck, you don't get these, which might hurt fighters a lot, but I don't know what else to do.
That's
and
what I would do.
Psionics, I don't know what I would do.
Well, and that's
maybe use the mystic stuff and let people pick a talent, or everyone picks a single discipline from the most recent one. They slowly gain power points as they level up. I don't know what I would do.
I don't know about that either, and that feels like the greater challenge is reflecting the psionic stuff. I think your solution to equipment is probably just fine. That'll be annoying for some, but I think it'll work. But psionics, it's complicated. You could do it. You can use the mystic rules and homebrew them, but I think that's also probably why we haven't gotten Dark Sun yet, or even just like a hint at it, and why we maybe will not, because maybe they just couldn't figure out the mystic or psionics at all.
Well, here's a question I have for you, Rob, and I was looking at the various online communities, sub-forums devoted for different campaign settings, Reddit and Facebook groups, and, compared to Forgotten Realms or Eberron, the sort of online communities for Dark Sun are incredibly small. Does this mean that there's actually really not that much hunger for something like Dark Sun? Maybe. I don't know.
I mean, I think that it is probably true that there is not much hunger for Dark Sun, and that it is a relatively niche campaign setting, and enthusiasts like us. Look, I was thinking about this when we were doing prep for this, Matt. You and I came up during the long, dark Sun period of fantasy and science fiction. There was a lot of time when it was not popular. There were not a lot of great movies. The 90s was I don't write in telling me something I've missed. There's a lot of great science fiction and fantasy from the 90s, but it was culturally a dark time. It was hard to find. There wasn't that much. And so, I don't know, I read everything. I consumed all of the existing D&D books. I enjoyed learning about and playing in Spelljammer and Pathfinder and Spelljammer and Dark Sun and even Greyhawk, and there's now a breadth and a depth of official and third-party fantasy, but also just so many good books and movies and television shows and ideas. And not that Dark Sun isn't great, but of course there's not much enthusiasm around a setting that has not or a genre that has not had an update in. Well, I guess it had one in 2010, right? 4th edition.
Right. They had one in 4th edition at the very last days of it.
So it's been 10 years, and even that was 4th edition, which sort of like a death knell. I'm glad we got Eberron out of it, but sorry to our 4th edition fans. I don't feel that strongly about it, but I do know that a lot of other people do. And it, I think maybe it's just the case that that there just is not that much enthusiasm for Dark Sun, even though we are big fans.
Do you think what do you think the reason for this is? Do you think it's like people are like, "Oh, I would love to play a brutal Dark Sun campaign where my players might die just from the heat exhaustion and then get eaten," and then no one in actuality really wants to do that?
Well, I think that's part of it, but I also just think that it's hard to market. It doesn't have a lot of visibility, and it's just not as, it just like doesn't have that critical mass of fans to get out there and be seen. I was thinking about this because it was really hard for me to pick up Book of the New Sun, which is something I've been wanting to read forever. Like, the library has one copy. It's like been out of print for a while. Like, this is just like one of, the Dying Earth subgenre, but it does not seem like this is something. It's a bit like, it's a bit like cyberpunk in terms of novels, in that its heyday is behind it. There's not as much enthusiasm as a setting and an idea and a genre. It is, I don't think that it needs, like, it's an idea whose time has passed, but it doesn't seem like there's a lot of people who are enthusiastic about it anymore, to be kind of like grimly cynical about Dark Sun and its inspirations.
There is some enthusiasm in that. I guess like the Mad Max reboot did okay, but that I think owes more to that just being a brilliant film.
That was just a great movie that came out of nowhere
for
too,
this
right?
genre.
Like, it's not like people. I was clamoring for Mad Max, but it definitely wasn't like 20 years after the last 30 years after the last Mad Max that anybody was like clamoring for a new one. But there were enough people with a passion for it to make a really great movie, which
There's no fan campaign being like, give us Tom Hardy as the Max.
But and that may be what it takes to revive something like Dark Sun, is a particularly enthusiastic writer or director or game designer just taking it upon themselves.
Yeah. And again, man, this is one of the problems with like making your world different while using the D&D rules, right? Is like, how do you use the D&D rules to make all the weapons in the game, which are shittier, still work? How do you use the D&D rules to reflect defilement or preserving or something like this? And like with both of these cases, you could just say, well, okay, regular stuff is the bone weapons, the crystal swords, the preserver magic, and then the evil cool stuff or the metal weapons have a more powerful stuff. But I don't know if that's completely satisfying.
Well, and this is what we've complained about, off and on since the beginning of the podcast about 5th edition, which is, by all accounts, the most successful, most popular, saved the game from possible extinction edition. So no shade there, but it does have, it has setting baked in, right? With things like Thieves' Cant and Warlock Patrons, and just generally the way that the mechanics work. It's harder than ever to homebrew or adjust the rules so that you can have a different setting. It has never been more difficult to do anything, to do weird things without breaking 5th edition rules.
Man, we complain so much that 5th edition hasn't taken bold enough leaps and given us something like Dark Sun, but maybe they're right to put this off, in that it is just very difficult to use these existing rules to make something like this happen. I don't know.
It definitely seems like a substantial challenge, so I can't blame them for working on other things first. That's absolutely the truth.
Yeah, but it's so cool. I mean, okay, I think sort of in moving towards a final judgment thing. At the end of the day, I think Dark Sun is very cool, right? In that playing a game where everything sucks, but in an interesting way, and there are just all sorts of huge villains begging to be killed by heroes or overthrown. I don't know, it's particularly appealing to me.
I like it too. I'm a big fan of Dune and John Carter, and obviously Dying Earth in general, and it's just got a different feel. It's just got we've talked a bunch. I just have a big soft spot for pulpy action, sci-fi, fantasy, and this is at the heart of it, and it lets you tell smaller scale but fun, punchy, dangerous, weird adventures, and I love Dark Sun for that.
I mean, who here doesn't get excited about the thought of being a muscly person in a leather harness carrying some giant sword made of bone from some insect, and traveling across the desert and then killing nobles in their lush garden Alhambra style palaces and taking their stuff.
Right. Who doesn't want to be a desert dwelling wanderer with a sharp mind who kills those who cross him? Who doesn't want to play a psionic character in a setting where psionics are baseline? Isn't that just a cool and different idea? I mean, that's or even who doesn't want to wouldn't it be cool to be a wizard and you have to keep your powers under wraps and you are forever dealing with the temptation to just take a little extra, just maybe to save your friends or to overthrow someone evil. It's a good setting.
Yeah, and I think often we see dungeon masters write homebrew settings where magic is illegal. I think this setting does it really well, especially with the base hypocrisy in that the 7 most powerful people in the world are all magicians, yet magic is illegal.
Yeah,
and obvious and has a good reason to be. Yeah, right.
And that's the difference is that magic is illegal for good reason, and it's dangerous not just because you might get arrested or killed, but because you could destroy the world or succumb to defilement. I know we have talked about rules like these being less than ideal in the past when people homebrew, you take on corruption or something like that for doing spells, but I really like the way that it is done in Dark Sun, and
right.
I think
especially when it has a very clear mechanical benefit that players want, right? When you defile a spell, it's you can increase the DC or add damage dice or something. These are things players always want.
They're
right?
good. I mean, you can do a free meta magic. You can cast without expending a spell slot. I mean, it's tempting. It's especially if you're in a tight spot.
Yeah. I think some of the weaker translations is I love the idea of Templars for cleric magic, but clerics also have the option of worshiping the four elements themselves, right? Air, earth, fire, water, etc. No Fire Nation or Earth Kingdom, sadly, but these to me seem less interesting.
Yeah, I like so I generally like the idea of a no god setting. My Anima Mundi is a no gods setting, but this seems half-baked.
No gods allowed.
Seems half-baked. There are other things that clerics could draw power from without allowing actual godlike deities. So
what would your this sort of also reminds me, 1, what would your choice be for clerics to draw their powers on? 2, sorcerers and warlocks, which are a big part of 5th edition, don't really fit in here very well.
Yeah, so the book I picked up had sorcerers, but they were described as the rarest of all magic users. And I'm not even sure how warlocks would even fit.
Other than you could easily retcon Templars to say that Templars are all warlocks.
Hey, that would make sense, actually.
Is honestly pretty
their patron
appealing
is a dragon king, and that might be interesting.
And if you force all your warlocks to pick one of the dragon kings, that's kind of
that
cool.
would be interesting. That would be really, really interesting. I mean, I'm thinking like a good, like the clerics could draw their power from the dying sun, or from a commitment to an ideal. This is not revolutionary or particularly interesting, but, I feel like there's no reason why divine magic has to be tied to a sentient, roughly anthropomorphized deific thing. You can just draw power from your faith, which you have to,
right. I guess there is something, the one thing that I would like to change is, arcane magic, particularly wizards, get all this special treatment, which made sense in 2nd edition, where mechanically that was a lot more important. But in 5th edition, where you also have sorcerers, warlocks, and clerics, and being the same power level, I guess if you made clerics drawing their power from something as unappealing as arcane magic, for example, the sun itself, right? Or the entropy of the world.
Yeah, that'd be a good one.
People might not like it. Though I guess it does make sense that there's less clerics because there are no actual gods doing interesting things or proving that they exist. Anyway, it's an interesting idea for magic that breaks the rules in interesting ways. Final thoughts.
I mean, I think we've talked about
on Athas.
It's not like this is the only setting in which you can do the types of adventures that we talked about, but I'm always looking for new and unique and interesting ideas, and Dark Sun is cool and unique and interesting from start to finish. It definitely encourages... what I guess I would take away from this is that a well-designed role-playing game and campaign setting especially has the setting and the mechanics inextricably linked. And Dark Sun does a really good job of this, especially in 2nd edition. I never played the 4th edition, so I can't tell you, but the way that they work together creates a really interesting play experience. And that's what I like a lot about Dark Sun.
Yeah, I have to say the same. I think if you're a dungeon master and you're looking for something that is as far away from Tolkien as possible to steal from, you can't have a better place to start than here. And honestly, what campaign setting world couldn't use a continent on the other side of the world from where your player characters start that is ruled by evil sorcerer kings and queens?
Yeah, it's great.
And pit fights.
And pit fights. Lots of pit fights. Lots of gladiatorial combat. It's good stuff.
Black hole sun, won't you come and wash away the rain? Black hole sun, won't you come? Won't you come? Black hole sun, won't you come and wash away the rain? Black hole sun, won't you come? Won't you come?
Okay, Rob, shall we dive into some letters before we head out?
Yeah, let's answer some mail.
This letter's from Chad. Hey, dudes. I am late, but hopefully not too late to respond about educators that do D&D. I'm just getting caught up with your newer podcast. I have started a club for 20-plus kids and also worked with my school's summer outreach program over the last summer to offer D&D as a summer school class for over 35 middle grade students. Been a longtime listener and appreciate the education, background, and structure of your podcast. I would love to hear more. Cheers, Chad from Athens. I promise my club doesn't worship the devil in my Bible Belt middle school I worked
Chad, Matt and I are both, I don't know if our listeners know this, but born and raised in the Bible Belt ourselves, so don't worry, you don't have to couch your letter. We know that not everybody
we also had to make promises that we weren't worshiping the devil.
We don't worry, we're not going to judge you. We've been through it too. Chad, thank you for writing. Matt, we've been promising a. Did we? Wait, we already did a D&D for kids. Or did we? I don't remember.
No, we did not. We have to do a D&D for kids episode
we'll talk about
soon,
running,
especially, or D&D for educators. In fact,
yeah,
might
we'll
be
talk about
better.
that soon. Possibly a double feature. But Chad, keep up the good work. I kind of want to hear about how 35 middle grade students worked with playing Dungeons and Dragons, but I commend your commitment to the hobby and your ability to corral middle schoolers in the first place.
I would love to hear more of your own experience. One of the things that I am trying to do with some of my students now is move them to running their own games, which has not happened yet, but I hope to do it soon. So if you have any advice on how to get the younglings set up being the dungeon masters themselves, or maybe you're already doing that, I would love to hear about it, Chad.
Thanks for writing, Chad.
From the Dungeon Master Hotline, 774-203-4629. All right, here's the message.
Hi, DMs. Just giving you guys a call because I am playing a 4th edition campaign with 3 other friends. I chose an elf paladin as my ancestry in my class. And in 4th edition, the elves seem to be a lot more like wood elves than the eldrin. And so I had a couple of questions for you for getting this character off the ground. My first question is, any tips to being a paladin of Bahamut as an elf? I don't like the idea that I've read on the internet of just rooting out any and all evil like the Spanish Inquisition, killing anyone with even a gray morality. And my second question is, how would you recommend tying together a paladin and an elf? The whole idea intrigues me, but I've kind of hit a wall as far as a backstory goes, and I want to get that figured out before playing next week. So any advice you have would be awesome. I love the show. Thank you guys so much for what you do, and we appreciate you guys so much. That's Nick signing off. Thanks, guys.
Nick, thank you for calling in. I think we're probably going to be too late to help you for your first session, but maybe we can help you round out your backstory. Matt, this is the sort of, to me, the critical question of playing a paladin is that you're sort of like fighting against this Torquemada instinct, right? You're like, how do I be something other than an obnoxious, purger of evil?
Well, I think, Rob, the question or the answer to that question is always to fight for something as opposed to against something. And being a paladin of Bahamut, I think gives you a clear answer, is you should ask your dungeon master if you can have, for example, some kind of patron. And that patron should probably obviously be a good aligned dragon that has some sort of mission in the world, right? And if you're worried that your dungeon master is not going to let you have a ally that is an immensely powerful dragon, that's fine. Maybe this can be just someone your character, your paladin, communicates with. Some silver dragon or gold dragon who is, a secret agent in the campaign area and needs your paladin to combat some sort of evil dragon presence or some kind of mission like that. So I would say go for having a boss as a paladin.
I like that a lot. And Matt's core idea is exactly right. So you can be a champion for good without being, purely concerned with the destruction of evil by, like Matt said, exactly, being for something. So Bahamut's a little complicated because he doesn't have the same portfolio as other gods do. He's a god of...
I gotta be honest, Nick, Bahamut's like one of my least favorite gods for player characters to use. That's okay.
It's fine.
We can disagree
but it's
on
an
this.
interesting challenge, but like Matt said, I love the idea of having a patron, like you're working for a silver dragon or something like that, or platinum dragon. But also you can just be, your role as a paladin of Bahamut can be to make the world safe for the creatures that serve Bahamut. You can be, maybe there are dragons in your region, or you are protecting a city with a particularly important connection to Bahamut, and your job is to sort of not to destroy evil, but to protect people, to preserve civilization, to build the world and make it safer. You know, you can oppose Tiamat by bringing order, but not by smiting evil. It's an interesting challenge, and it kind of depends on the setting and your DM. But I like Matt's idea of working for an agent of Bahamut.
The other option is to always downplay Bahamut and upplay the sort of elf or Eladrin aspect of your background. For example, maybe Bahamut or some ancient gold or platinum dragon was once the protector of your Eladrin elf city, and so basically all of the hero agents are by default paladins of Bahamut in gratitude of that ancient form of protection, and your character's mission is not to go kill everyone with a gray morality or who isn't good, but to root out and destroy the agents who would one day bring your Eladrin city back to the material plane and loot it or destroy it, or something like that.
The other easy thing is that your clan or your city or your order, just like Matt said, has a tradition of being blessed by or graced with the power of Bahamut, and your interpretation of that power is protection, is order, is doing good for the sake of doing good, not smiting evil. That's actually probably the easiest way to do it.
It's always fun to sort of reverse the traditional paladin origin story. Instead of being a paladin because you just love this god and what they stand for so much, perhaps your Eladrin clan or city once saved the life of one of Bahamut's platinum dragons, and whether they like it or not, their line has been blessed with those powers for 20 generations, and it's up to your character what they want to do with those powers.
So yeah, I hope that's helpful. I know we probably missed the window on your first session, but it's an interesting question, and
things get delayed.
I honestly I do love this. I like that in Pathfinder and and actually in 5th edition, they've finally decoupled paladins from the lawful good anchor that was hanging around their neck. But it was always kind of a fun, if you were willing to try, fun character challenge to work within that and create someone interesting anyway. So good luck, and let us know what you come up with. Thanks for writing, Nick. Thanks for calling, Nick.
All right, or calling. I have one more short one, Rob. This one's from Greg. Greg writes, "Great podcast. My nephew wants to play a Kitsune in 5th edition, and to be honest, how could I piece this one together? He likes changing his character's appearance to look like anyone. Keep rolling them dice." Now, Rob, what do you know about Kitsune?
Well, Matt, the noble kitsune is a
kitsune
is a type of fox spirit or creature in Japan.
What does fox say?
So
yes,
I am not the I actually think this is great. I think this is interesting. I'm not a huge fan of anthropomorphic animal people, but I respect those who are. I am also, while I am an appreciator of fine Nipponese entertainment, I am not as well qualified as others. So there are some pretty good kitsune homebrews out there. If it were if it were up to me, the basic thing that I would do is I would give a charisma bonus, charisma bonus, and maybe a dex bonus. I would give them some sort of advantage to disguise or possibly deception.
I got it, Rob. Here's what you do if you want to keep it as simple as possible, is you just use the stats from Eberron, either the free Unearthed Arcana stats, which were slightly more balanced, or the ones from the published book for the Changeling race.
Yeah, that's probably the easiest way.
Add in the fact that one of the forms you can take is a form of a fox person.
Yeah.
If you want to go further, you could say they can shape change into an actual fox once per day and as a druid wild shape kind of thing.
That's the fast and easy way. Honestly, that's what I would...
Because the changeling adds a charisma, dexterity, or intelligence bonus and has shape change.
That's the fast and easy one. There's probably some more interesting things that you could do, but that's honestly got the right feel. Just let your nephew describe their character as a kitsune. So I think that's honestly like the easiest way, especially if you're trying to get this on board as fast as possible.
Since you know much of the lore of the Orient, Rob, what is like sort of the purpose of a kitsune?
Oh, God.
I think more importantly, you should ask your nephew, like, what is the goal of this sort of character who is a fox person?
Yeah. I guess it depends on the setting and where it fits in, but if they want to be a fox person, let them be a fox person. I mean,
Yeah, but what do fox people want?
What fox people want? That's a good question. This is a question for you, Greg, and for your nephew. But I would say that beyond this, like I think what the point Matt is making, and I agree, beyond just the stats and appearance, what is the purpose? What do they want? Where they come from? What's their society? Just make them think through being a fox person.
Maybe they'll come up with some interesting idea of what a wise kitsune would want, and that will make them have a more interesting character.
Greg, thanks for writing, and
thanks, Greg.
I hope that works. So yeah, thanks everybody for listening to our long pontification on Dark Sun, and we've talked about Eberron now. We've talked about Dark Sun. This is probably time for us to talk about Spelljammer soon, Matt.
Yes.
In great detail. Maybe that would be a time for us to discuss your
finally finish typing up some of those rules for spaceships.
So no promises yet. None of us have been able to do any of the homebrew things that we said we would do, but soon, hopefully, trademark asterisk, we will talk about Spelljammer and hopefully have a little bit of our own homebrew to share. But yeah, thanks everybody for listening.
Yes.
And keep rolling them dice.
Little darling, it's been a long, long, lonely winter. Little darling, it seems like years since it's been here. Here comes the sun. Here comes the sun, and I say, it's all right. Little darling, the smiles are returning to their places. Little darling, it seems like years since they've been there. But here comes the sun. Here comes the sun, and I say, it's all right.